important do you think it is for podcasters who are looking for that success to insert their own personality into their show? How important is that?
Well, it's wildly important, specifically as podcasts grow. So the thing that I was always trepidatious in starting a podcast, and because I felt like there are so many podcasts that already exist, and specifically the way that the podcasting landscape looked was that whenever somebody dropped a book, they would set out like their podcasting tour. And so the same person you would see would be on a litany of podcasts and everybody's asking very similar questions. And I felt like it was powerful and very interesting, but also rather rote and not all that engaging. So if we looked at what was working for some people, I knew that coming into the game much later to that and be like, yet stop 187 on a podcast tour, it just didn't set me apart. And so I would rather grow much smaller with a tiny group of people who are invested in the host to show up as his or her place of power, and then bring in and sprinkle in guests to kind of jazz it up. But I 100% believe that the same reason why people understand they're not just buying a cake, they're buying it from a baker, and they're not just buying photos, they're buying a piece of the photographer, and they're not just buying a course, they're buying a piece of the course creator. I believe the same thing when it comes to podcasting. It's like podcasts are 1 in a million, 1 in like 10 million if we're going to be very serious. But the thing that sticks out is the people who own their story, stand in their purpose, and bring their followers and their listeners along for the journey. And I believe it's best of views and personality.
Well, I definitely agree with you on bringing your listeners along for the journey. I find that most excellent podcasters are doing that. But one of the difficult things about podcasting is it can sometimes be very difficult to get that back and forth communication with your audience, right? A lot of times with podcasting, it feels like you're speaking to your audience, but not hearing from them. What are some ways that we can actually engage with our audience and get that direct feedback from them, Jasmine? What are you doing?
Well, the podcast is built that way. It doesn't feel that way. No, Mark, it is that way. Podcasts are unidirectional. Now, there are great people just like you who make it feel like a conversation and make it feel like people, listeners, are eavesdropping in on a conversation between two people. But I don't believe that conversations are existing on podcasts. I believe that the conversations are existing outside the podcast, but the podcast is a conduit of trust and reliability. If then that becomes the case, our call to action, our CTA, which listeners will hear again and again, is we want somebody to do one thing. We want people to take one action at the end of every single podcast. So at the end of every single show, you will hear me ask somebody to send me a DM. Sometimes inside of the podcast, like I'll bake code words. Like I had an episode, strangely enough, I didn't actually think it was going to do all that well, but it was like the top 3 things you should be doing in 2021 to market your business. And I baked in there somewhere around like the 3/4 mark, a code word. And I was like, if you made it to this point in this podcast, send me this code word on Instagram. And it's so funny that this podcast dropped in January, months ago, and then all of a sudden I'm still getting the code word, which has actually been an unexpected benefit of understanding the long tail of a good podcast episode, that people can still be listening months after the fact, sending in the code word. So when somebody sends in a code word, it appears as a DM. If I would have said, hey, send me a DM, some people would probably not do it because they're like, what do I say? When you have a silly code word, and I'm not going to share the code word because I want people to listen. Only the legit listeners will know the code words. Oftentimes I'll make references to like Beyonce. I was like, if you love Beyonce, send me a Beyonce gif. And all of a sudden, one morning, I totally forgot that I had that as a CTA, and I had all these Beyonce gifs, and I was like, my day is made. Like, the queen herself is showing up on Instagram. But the thing was, it's not just that point of connection. It's the fact that I will respond. Now, the minute that they went from podcast listener to casual, I might send her a gift, to I show up and send somebody a message, they're like, oh, snap. We just got real deep in a matter of seconds. Sometimes, very often on podcasts, you'll have the CTA is to sign up for a free resource, because then what happens? They get an immediate email, and then every single week I'm dropping in their inbox with a little bit of a love bomb. Not a sales pitch, not a funnel. It's what are you doing to take action? That is how we're building trust and building those communications, two-way communication.
So I really like this idea of the Easter egg, putting a little Easter egg in your episode. It's actually not something I've heard before. I implement it a little bit in my business, typically.
Let's do it now, Mark. Well, I see when you call it an Easter egg, you got real fancy and all techie. You got real, like, we should make it like code word, like, take an egg up to the club and then they'll let you into the speakeasy. So what's the code word? So what's our code word? People who are listening, they need to DM us. What is it? Come on.
Secret agent. How about secret agent? How about that? You got me in this kind of like CIA type of vibe going on here. DM me, secret agent on Instagram. DM Jasmine as well, and we're gonna know where it's from. You're listening to the After Hours Entrepreneur.
Okay, wait. But you know, this is a small tweak, because what happens if it's too hard when you say DM me? Like, I'm lazy. If I heard you, and I listen to my podcast mostly in two ways. I listen to them while I'm working out, and I listen to them while I'm getting ready for the day. I'm really not pausing my deadlifts to be like, let me search for entrepreneurs afterwards. So I'm like, DM me at Jasmine Star. Remember, at Jasmine Star. I want to see those Beyonce gifts. So let's try it again, Mark, with a clear code word, and then follow it up with your Instagram.
Oof, okay, so this is a lot of, I love this, by the way. I'm all about action, so this is actually perfect for the show. So DM at Mark SAVANT, secret agent.
There you go, son. There you go.
It's 2 words, but you know, DM me at Mark SAVANT, secret agent. I got something special for you.
I love this. Okay, sorry, I totally derailed the conversation. Let's get it back.
No. And so what we just did there, I think is really important. It's not just hearing, listening, but having this back and forth understanding. Thank you so much for watching. I'm glad you enjoyed this episode. I've got several other episodes right here for you. Smash one of these videos to make sure that you don't miss out on the tips, tools, and tactics of industry experts. Let's take that side hustle full time. Smash one of these links.